All right. Sorry, I'm a little late. First of all, I haven't streamed on this channel for quite some time. I got a notification that if I don't start streaming on it, it's going to lose monetization. Really don't care, to be honest with you, if this channel loses monetization. I don't make anything off of it, but it's nice to have as a backup. So I thought it'd be kind of fun to stream to it, probably for the next couple days, having some fun streams. This particular stream, I was going to do the other night, so please forgive the thumbnail, which says Midnight Madness, because I was going to do this at midnight. Clearly, it's not midnight, but it is midnight somewhere. But, whatever. So, just so you guys know, I'll be streaming on the NonSequitur Show today with Dr. William Pye, who did a review of my paper. It's a good review. It's a little critical of the expository on my paper, which is it's fine. I mean, look, I did not ever claim that my paper, as written, would be publishable to a journal without some major rewrites to it. I recommend that when people write a paper, they make it very, very succinct. But I didn't, because I wanted to be verbose, because I wanted to be able to explain to the people in great detail why I believe the argument is good, why it's valid using different forms of logic, and why it's sound. And I think I did that. And I know Dr. Pye agreed upon that, with that. So I'm really happy with his review, and we're going to be talking about his review at 7 o'clock Eastern on the NonSequitur Show. But before we do that, I thought it'd be kind of fun to talk about some of the other, let's say, not so brilliant refutations of my paper. I thought it's kind of funny because I have my paper has had like 2,000 somehow views. It's in the top 1% of academic EDU papers, which, by the way, is only based upon the amount of times it's read. Right? It doesn't really address the actual information in the paper. Right? So you can't really say that because it's in the top 1%, it's a good paper. There's no correlation there. However, it hasn't had a lot of eyes on it. That actually you can say, because well over 2,000 views is pretty substantial, and it's been talked about a number of places. So, Dr. Pye did a really detailed review of it, probably hyper detailed, but he gets to the logic and explains why the logic that I have in my paper is correct, because a lot of people just for some reason said that the argument was invalid, which makes no sense. They say that it's not sound because they use wrong definitions, which is, again, makes no sense. We'll get into the technical aspects of the paper on the NonSequitur Show at 7 o'clock. I put the link in the video description. But I kind of wanted to review some of the other comments that I find on Facebook pages where people think they understand my paper, but they don't, because they cannot even articulate what my paper is even arguing, and they certainly can't articulate what the logic is, which is really disconcerting, because if you're going to say that my paper is invalid, it really kind of helps to at least have a basic understanding of the subject matter, at least I'd imagine, right? So I collected a bunch of comments from some Facebook pages that I thought were just mind-blowingly stupid. I'm sorry, brilliant refutations. And I thought we'd read them. Again, forgive the thumbnail. I was going to do this at midnight, but I didn't get a chance to, so it's midnight somewhere. All right, let's kind of dive into this. So I was going to start this off with a funny joke, because I don't know, this was, it just, I saw it, so I was like, oh, I'll add it to the stream here. But first of all, we wave out there, everybody. Hey, I'm not ignoring the live chat. If you're out there, I'll see you eventually. I'll check back every so often, but I'm kind of just focused on these right here. And let me know if you got questions as we go. So this is something I thought was funny. It says, this is a group I'm in, Atheist and Theist Debates. It says, so atheists say there's no objective truth. Not all atheists say that, by the way. Matter of fact, most atheist philosophers are, in fact, moral realists. Most atheist philosophers do tend to moral realism. I tend to moral realism. I don't believe in God, but I accept moral realism. I do think that's probably more likely the case. But again, that's moral theory. But it says, what's the difference between a person who kills his dog to feed his son and another who kills his son to feed his dog? My answer, about 20 to life. Oh, come on, that's funny. Now, again, I think that somebody who kills a dog should get 20 to life. I understand that the value of a human is clearly more valuable than a dog. However, I'm a dog lover, and so I think that both should get 20 to life. But that's the difference in objective morality, 20 to life. All right, so to start this off, I put this on the NonSequitur Show, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, I guess. And I've also put it in many different Facebook pages. And one of the reasons why I put this particular syllogism on a Facebook page is that if somebody's going to critique my paper and they don't understand the difference between modus tollens or modus ponens, or they don't understand what valid versus soundness is, I don't think they're going to be qualified enough in any way, shape, or form to review my paper. This is first day week logic. This is nothing of any consequence in logic per se. It's basic stuff. I mean, this is, if you enrolled in a college course in logic, this is something you would learn in the first day or so. I mean, at least in the first week. I can't imagine it would take much longer than that. This is simple stuff. So if somebody cannot understand this, then I don't think that they should be telling me or anybody else that my paper is not valid. By the way, anybody out there can wave? I waved out there. So let me know that this is working. Make sure that I'm streaming to the right channel and you can hear me. Like I said, I don't expect a lot of people to watch this. This is going to be up for later. People can watch it after the fact. I'll send people to this video after I do the NonSequitur Show. But I don't get a lot of traffic on this channel. All right. So I asked, is this valid? Is this sound? Explain your answer. I say P implies Q. If 1 plus 1 equals 3, then 2 plus 2 equals 5. It is not the case. So therefore, it's not Q. So 2 plus 2 does not equal 5, and not P. 1 plus 1 does not equal 3. Now, this is perfectly valid and it's perfectly sound. Premise 1 is your material implication, your conditional. P implies Q. P here is 1 plus 1 equals 3, and Q is 2 plus 2 equals 5. Those are both false. And if you ever look at the truth table for a conditional, if both P and Q are false, the conditional is true. It's called a vacuous truth. So premise 1 here is actually true. Premise 2, which is 2 plus 2 does not equal 5, is clearly true. Conclusion, 1 plus 1 does not equal 3 is clearly true. So premise 1, premise 2 are both true, which means the conclusion must follow from a valid form of rule of inference called modus tollens. This is valid and sound. Dr. Pi notes on here, the form of the argument is modus tollens, which can be shown to be valid through the elementary properties of the connectives. While I produced a video on the topic, he has a great whole series on this. If you go check out his channel, which I'll put in the link in the video description later. I can provide a written calculation if needed. So he agrees that this is valid and sound. So if you ever see this on a Facebook page and somebody's saying, oh, that's not valid or it's not sound, they're clearly wrong. All right. So let's get into the actual refutations of my work here. So let's see. I have no, by the way, this is no particular order. That's from Kevin. And most of these are from public pages and stuff like that. So, or from my personal Facebook page. This was on my personal Facebook page, I think. He says, so you're allegedly so smart. No, I never said that. I don't know where you get that from. I'm not an idiot. I don't think because you're not an idiot does not by necessity make you smart. I just don't think I'm an idiot. Evidence of God or shut up. Okay? You know I'm right and you can't stand it. That's the real problem. And I just put hashtag dumb. Now, if you go look at one of my posts on my Facebook page, I actually explain what I mean by these. If I put hashtag dumb, that's a note to me that the person I'm talking to is just dumb. If I put hashtag facepalm, it just means this person says something really stupid. Hashtag, whatever. I just have like a system that I use. And so if I put a hashtag this on there, it's really a note to me. So I go back and I can remember with the person who I'm dealing with, something about them, because like I'll put hashtag dishonest. That just means that somebody that I've talked to is dishonest. So it's really a note to me more than anything else. But he's like, provide evidence of God or shut up. I'm not a theist. I don't believe in God. So that's not a trump card, right? That's not a card that you play every time you get cornered somewhere. And first of all, even if I was a theist, unless I said I can prove God or give you evidence for God or whatever, that's not something you can ask somebody to give anything for. That's called a straw man. Now, I believe there's evidence for and against God. That's fine. A theist can offer evidence, and that's fine. If a theist can say they can prove God, okay, then ask for them for that proof. Nothing wrong with that. Do I think there's a proof that God exists or God does not exist? No, I do not. I don't think there can be a proof. I think it's a posteriori knowledge. If anything, if we ever could know, and I don't think that a proof could ever exist that could literally prove one way or another if God exists or not. I just don't think it's possible at this point. I can change my mind on it, but I just don't think that it's provable. The closest, I mean, you can argue something like the modal ontological argument by Plantinga, which is a valid argument, but that requires you accept certain conditions. So it's not really a proof either. In fact, even Plantinga argues that what he puts out is not really proofs per se, because they only really are convincing to somebody who accepts the conclusion initially, which means you're not really proving anything. I can have a disjunction of 1 + 1 = 5 or God exists. It is not the case that 1 + 1 = 5, therefore God exists. That's perfectly valid. And to a theist, it's sound, believe it or not. A theist would go, yeah, that's sound. But to an atheist or an agnostic, they would say, no, it's not sound. Because it's not, therefore it's not a proof, right? The theist has already accepted that God exists. Therefore, the disjunction, 1 + 1 = 5 or God exists, they're already going to accept that if you do a disjunctive syllogism and take away one of the disjuncts, you're going to end up with God exists, which is completely valid. But they're also going to say the premises are true, which I wouldn't, obviously. All right, so I like #dumb, and he says, that's what I thought. Don't go running your mouth on shit you can't clearly back up. You believe in fairy tales, and I'm the stupid one. Again, where do these people get this stuff from? And I'm not the only one they do it to. They do it to Answers and Reasons, Joe. They do it to Trolley Dave. They do it to the Ben Speed Watkins. They do it to, who else? Oh my God. It's just a lot of people that are atheist and non-theist and agnostics. They seem to fall back to this, prove your God exists. Oh, they do it to Chris Attlee. They do it to a lot of people that don't believe in God, which is silly. It makes them look so stupid. All right. This is from one of my favorite all-time dumb atheists. He goes by the name The John Richards. He is a ex-program director for a group called Atheist Alliance International. You might have familiarized yourself with them recently because they have a board of directors that basically took over and mishandled the amount of monies. They lost their national, Security Council. They were in the Security Council or something like that, but they lost all that. Basically, they just had a hostile takeover, and he was part of that. And he's not very bright. He argues, I'm not even joking here. This guy literally argues that plants evolved from animals. Yeah, plants evolved from animals, not had common ancestry, not just talking about endosymbiosis, and not just talking about protistas or colonist protistas. This guy literally argues that plants were the direct descendants of the direct ancestors of animals. He also argues that the law of identity, X = X, doesn't hold true ontologically because of time. Don't try to wrap your head around it. It makes no sense. But he says, this is about the law of identity. He says, it's never true in reality. So, this cup is not, I got my filter on. But yeah, this cup is not the cup. What does that mean? X is not equals X? How? He says, for something to be the same as itself, that is, not to change over time, time would have to stop, and it doesn't. We can only imagine the law of identity to be correct. What the hell does time have to do with the law of identity? Like, seriously? What does the law of identity have to do with the time? There's no variable other than X in all of X = X, and that's not time. That's itself. That's the object. An object equals itself. There's no time variable in the law of identity. Hey, Anna Frida. Good evening. So I'm really confused about how the John Richards thinks that the law of identity doesn't hold ontologically because of time. There's no time in the law of identity. The law of identity is just saying that something is itself. That is ontologically true. So one of the dumbest comments I think I've ever seen. This guy says, you're immediately wrong with your first point. Where they start off, I'm immediately wrong. Well, then I must be wrong. He says, is this intentional mischaracterization? If not, feel free to refer back to the literal thousands of atheist responses pointing out that atheism is not, and never has been, that gods do not exist. Actually, it's been that way for the last 400 years. I say, what? Atheism has been God does not exist for the last 400 years of philosophy. You must be joking. He never got back to me, I don't think. Yeah, it has never been gods do not exist. Well, you might want to explain that to the academic literature that's out there, that almost all of it uses atheism as the position God does not exist. That has been the understanding of atheism in academia for the last 400 years. It wasn't until 1971 when Dr. Anthony Flew tried to argue that he wanted atheism to be thought not as the belief that God does not exist, but as somebody who does not believe there's a God. This was his entreaty. This is what he wanted people to accept. It was not well received by people. People just thought it was a bad argument for the most part. Some people agreed with it. Dr. Michael Martin liked it, but even he thought there were some problems with it. But for the most part, his argument failed, and my paper refutes his argument. Why I believe there's many reasons why his argument's wrong. I think if you really wanted to look at some of the technical aspects, go read Dr. Paul Draper. He has 3 really good reasons why not to accept Dr. Flu's argument. But my paper is really just an argument of why not to accept Dr. Flu's request to think of atheism as merely does not believe God exists. So this guy who says there's never been that God does not exist, he's just wrong. Anybody who's ever looked at atheism, anybody who's read a paper on atheism knows he's wrong, because that's the standard interpretation. According to Stanford, according to Cambridge, according to Oxford, the usual, most standard interpretation of atheism in academia is the belief that God does not exist. So, again, brilliant refutations. This guy says, you're either convinced theist or not convinced atheist. He's already setting up a false dichotomy here. Even someone that is agnostic is one or the other. No, they're not. Matter of fact, every paper you'll read on that subject will disagree with this. Every paper, when it talks about agnostic in the ontological domain, meaning the proposition of God exists. When I say ontological domain, I mean that there's a state of being, right? There's an existence of God. It is the case that God exists, or it is not the case that God does not exist. That doesn't by necessity relate to a belief condition. I can believe God exists, I can believe God does not exist, or I can have no position either way. Or I can have both beliefs, so those are clearly, that'd be an epistemic contradiction. So rationally, I can only hold I believe there's a God, I believe there's not a God, or I don't have belief either way. So in academia, in philosophy, agnostic is somebody who does not have a belief either way. The atheist is not convinced, sure, but the atheist believes there's no God. Just like the theist is not convinced that God does not exist. It's just same rational entailment. For every belief, there's a non-belief. If I believe there's a God, I don't believe there isn't. If I believe there isn't a God, I don't believe there is. There's a rational entailment between the belief and the non-belief of something else, of the negation. So I could actually change this and say you're either convinced, atheist, meaning you're convinced there is no God, or you're not convinced, theist, which makes no sense, because if you're not convinced there is no God, does that by necessity make you a theist? Well, clearly not, because we don't use the term that way. We think of theism as somebody who believes there's no God. So this is a false dichotomy. And so agnostics are neither theist or atheist. And you could go read any of the academic literature for this. You can go read Burgess Jackson. You could read Draper. You could read Drange. You can read Demi. You could read P.K. Moser. You could read any of the Snellenberger. You could read any of these. Any of them. And they'll all say that this is wrong. So when I see people say something like this, the first question I usually ask them, I didn't reply to this guy. I probably did, but I didn't take a picture of it. So I don't remember what I told him. But every time I have ever asked anybody, where's your evidence for this? They have none. They have absolutely none whatsoever. Other than, what they find on some Google foo. They don't ever cite any academic person. They don't ever cite any literature because they're wrong. They're absolutely wrong. All right. Oh, this is from John Richards again. Yes, one of my favorite dumb atheists. He says, I've got bad news for you, Steve. Oh, that never starts off well, does it? If you track back far enough, we did evolve from plants. See, I told you. I wasn't kidding. I was foreshadowing. Well, there you go. So John Richards, who was, again, the program director for Atheist Alliance International, this is his belief. If you track back far enough, we did, all capitalized, evolve from plants. No, John, we didn't. And when I asked John, well, who agrees with him, he said every biologist. No, I know a lot of biologists, and not a single biologist has agreed with you on this, John. Not one. No one. Nobody. Never in my life have I heard anybody argue that we evolved from plants. Now, they can argue we evolved from Colonus protistas, but that wasn't plants. Plants and animals diverged very early on. Plants are related to animals because we share a common ancestor, but there is no direct lineage between animals and plants. You're an idiot. I don't know how else to put it. I mean, you're an idiot. And then when biologists have chimed in, they're like, yeah, he's wrong. He's just like, he just reiterates his claim. He's like, you're just misunderstanding what they're saying, Steve. I'm like, no, I'm not. They're saying you're wrong, John. Anybody out there agree with John? Let me know in the comments section if you agree with John that we evolve from plants or animals evolve from plants. I don't know why I redacted this. It's from John. Yeah, sorry. I redacted this and put it in my folder. I had a special folder for this, but I don't need to redact John because he doesn't care. All right, what else we got here? This is from Thomas. He says, starts the argument with, I love this one. This is one of the most brilliant refutations I've ever seen of my arguments. You guys ready for this? Starts the argument with if. That shows the complete confidence he has in his position. Typical ignorant mind. I'm like, yes, it's called a conditional. P implies Q. So what's the issue? P implies Q is if P, then Q. It is on every modus tollens and every modus ponens, and there's other rules of inference out there as well that use conditionals. Every one of them starts that way. They're called a hypothetical. If it is the condition that P is this, then Q. That has nothing to do with your confidence of your position. It has to do with the form of a valid rule of inference from which you're logically deriving a conclusion. This guy I would consider to be a logical idiot. I don't know how anybody, and this is, by the way, this is not the first time I've seen this particular refutation. This is arguing against my paper here. I think it was. Or something that I've argued one of my arguments, if something. But that's how every argument starts when it comes to a valid rule of inference. If P, then Q. P, therefore Q, is a valid rule of inference. They all start with if. That's not a refutation because you started your hypothetical and your material condition with if. That's stupid. So yeah, that was one of my favorite ones. This guy writes, why should anyone disprove the existence of something that's never been proven to exist? If you think gods are real, which I don't, it cannot be due to either reason or evidence, nor no reasons or evidence of gods exist. Okay, well, first of all, as I've tried to explain to people, if you have proven something to be the case, it can never be disproven. Again, hypothetical, if, right? If you have proven that God exists, it can never be disproven that God does not exist. It cannot be. It cannot happen. It is a logical impossibility. So for an atheist to say, well, I cannot disprove God exists until you prove God exists, it's stupid. They fundamentally are not showing they understand the concept of what a logical proof is. If something has been logically proven, it cannot be disproven, period. Never. Now, somebody's going to go, but Steve, what happens if you find an error in the proof? Well, then it was never proven to begin with. You're retracting the claim that it was proven. But if it is proven, then you cannot disprove it. There's a big difference between if something is proven and if it has a mistake in it, then it was never proven to begin with. I wrote a blog entry called The Principle of Attribution and Retraction about knowledge and belief. Is very similar. I don't have false knowledge. Nobody can have false knowledge. You can have a false belief, but you can't have false knowledge. So when you attribute a knowledge claim to something and you get it wrong, what you do is you walk back your claim. If I say I know something and it turns out that is not the case, I don't say I had a false knowledge. I say that my claim to knowledge was false. Because you could not have false knowledge. I can have a false belief. I can say I believe this, and then I can look back and go, yeah, you know what? I had a false belief and correct it. But I cannot have false knowledge because knowledge by definition must be true. So once something has been proven, you cannot disprove it. So this is just a dumb comment. And then it says, if you think gods are real, it cannot be due to either reason or evidence. Well, I think every theist in the world would disagree with you. Unless you're a pre-supper or a fiatist, most people that believe in God do so because of reasons and evidence that they have. And you just by fiat trying to undercut that is not a fair argument, and two, it's a very intellectually dishonest argument. Hi, John. See John out there. So this particular person wrote, this is just a lame-ass, surface-level misunderstanding of what was trying to be said. Here, let me fix this for you. Let me fix it for you so you completely understand. I like to understand. I like when people tell me I'm wrong and they'll help me understand, even though I never asked them for their help. And 9 times out of 10, they do not clarify anything and they make things worse. So he says, God has not been proven. No kidding. Wow, I would have never known that. It hasn't been proven. Yeah, no kidding. There's nothing to disprove. Well, again, if God was proven, you can't disprove it. You can only disprove something if it has not been proven. So I don't understand the argument here because God has not been proven. Therefore, you still can disprove it. There's still time. Go ahead. Nothing about what was said was implied. Once God is proven, then it can be disproven. No, it can't. Again, a fundamental misunderstanding how logical proofs work. You cannot disprove something once it's been proven. How fucking stupid does one have to be to understand that? Damn, shaking my head. Well, Kevin, you're pretty dumb just to think this. Because, again, I don't know how you could possibly think that this is a brilliant refutation of what I've or anybody else has said. Because you can only disprove something if it has not been proven. Since God has not been proven one way or another, go ahead and disprove God's existence. Nobody's stopping you. I'm not stopping you. Go ahead. This guy writes, after reading your post, it appears you have little understanding of agnostic atheist, Gnostic atheism, or Gnostic atheist atheism. Yeah, I, of all people, have little understanding. Okay. As soon as I say that, I'm going, well, let's compare. Let's compare understandings. I've written four really comprehensive blog entries on this particular topic. And I'd really like to rewrite the Wikipedia page, or at least have somebody with credentials to rewrite it based upon what my arguments are. My arguments for agnostic atheist, why it's nonsensical in the weak case, I know it convinced Matt Dillahunty because Matt Dillahunty changed his position years ago. And he changed his position years ago after my arguments. They were around at the time, and I know they were told to him. And one of the reasons he gives why he no longer identifies as agnostic atheist is because knowledge is a subset belief, and you cannot have a epistemic modification of a non-belief position, which was what I was saying for years. So I know he got that directly from me. So yeah, I do understand agnostic atheist, and I've also understood that to date nobody has ever shown where that came from. That's not in any academic literature, and to date nobody's ever showed a logical schema where that schema would actually work. Is this an open panel? Maybe after I get through these. I don't have very many to do. I might open it up. We'll see. But feel free to add. And like I said, I might open it up. I don't get a lot of viewers on this channel. This is basically because I just have to start streaming to it, or else I'll lose monetization, which I really don't care about. But if I keep it, that's fine. It's a good alt channel for this kind of stuff. He says, you indeed appear to be a simpleton. I'm a simpleton. Okay. It would be a step down for even the most average atheist to bother debating you. Hope this helps. Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, Mike Rise. I have Dr. William Pye coming on at 7 Eastern on one of my main channels, NonSequitur Show. Link is in the video description for that. Come by and show Dr. Pye why he's wrong and that my paper is incorrect. If I'm a simpleton, it should be very easy to refute my argument and my logic, right? So this is what I think is funny. I don't take things personally when people call me stupid or a simpleton or anything like that. I think it's comical because, when it comes to agnostic atheist, I have probably written more about this as a layperson than anybody that I've met. There are other people that have written about it well after the fact, after reading my work. I know that Answers and Reason, they have a lot of good stuff on this particular topic. Joe is very, very knowledgeable about this topic, and I'm the one that got him interested in it. He wrote a long time ago how he was one of these lack-of-belief atheists, and he met me, and he's like, dude, this guy's got some really interesting views, and he's just taken them and made his own blog post, and they're very, really, really, really good. Him and Trolley Dave, who's working on his PhD I don't know. Did he get his PhD in philosophy yet? I don't know. Did anybody know if Trolley Dave got his PhD? I know he graduated, but I don't know if that was his master's or for his doctoral. But anyways, my point being is, if I'm a simpleton, then it should be real easy to show where I'm wrong, right? I mean, if I'm a simpleton and you can't show why I'm wrong, wouldn't that make you a greater simpleton? I mean, think about that. I mean, wouldn't as a superlative, you be the greatest simpleton, right? Because you're worse than me because I have an argument. You can't show why my argument's wrong, but I'm a simpleton, so it should be easy. So come by, Mike, and show why we're wrong. This is a good one too. This is from Michael Sherlock, who again was involved with the Atheist Alliance International. Michael is a bit of a troll. He gets a lot wrong about atheism, which is not surprising. And he wrote this on my Facebook page. He said, "Evolved from equals common ancestor. You scientifically illiterate moron." Well, yes and no. There's direct lineage, and there's a common ancestor between two phylogenetic trees, Michael Sherlock. Plants and animals do share a common ancestor, but they are two different kingdoms. They are two different phylogenetic branches. We did not evolve from plants. So, no, evolve from does not mean the exact same thing as common ancestor. Plants and animals share common ancestry, which again would probably be what's called colonus protistas. But that doesn't mean we evolved from plants. So Michael Sherlock, in his infinite genius, decided to try to back up the John Richards, who was arguing we evolved from plants, and said something on my Facebook page about it, which was this. So I was like, Michael, and people did correct him. They're like, Michael, no, it's not the same thing. They're just not the same thing. So I thought that was funny. What else I got here? I don't know how these ended up here, but I'll show them anyways. I just put a bunch of stuff in my folder. So this is what my paper argues for people that want to go read my paper, which I'll put in the video description. But go to the NonSequitur Show channel and follow the link to the show that's coming up at 7 o'clock Eastern. I have it there. But this is basically what my paper argues. That if you assign weak case conditions, the terms atheism and theism, they're just going to be semantically collapsed. And they're all going to mean the same thing. Because I can logically show that theism, agnostic, and atheism in the weak case are the same exact logical position. There's no difference. None. Logically speaking. And this has been reiterated multiple times by multiple people who know the subject matter that I am correct on this. Dr. Pi did a review. He did a very formal, logical breakdown, and he agreed. Yes, I am right. But I'll get into that on the NonSequitur Show. But this is basically what my paper's about. And these are the refutations to my paper. And I give a little analogy here. Hot and cold are not warm because these are called contraries. This is called a semiotic square of opposition that uses contraries, not categoricals, like you'd find on a normal Aristotelian categorical square of opposition. This is a special type of square of opposition called semiotic square of opposition that uses categorical statement or contrary statements. So I'm not going to get into the technicalities of this particular argument in this stream because it's not for that. It's to have fun. But I basically it shows that look, just because something is not hot doesn't mean it's cold. Not hot can mean warm. Just because you're not a theist does not mean you're an atheist. Same thing. If you go back to here, just because you're a theist does not necessitate you're an atheist. You could be an agnostic and not be either. Atheism does not mean non-theism. They are not the same set. No philosopher in the world has I ever seen can demonstrate that atheism and non-theism are the same set. They're not. Atheism is a proper subset of non-theism. If you think that atheism is the same thing as non-theism in philosophy, you're absolutely wrong. This is how it actually works. So if you're not hot, it doesn't mean that you're cold. It means that you're just not hot. And there's other proper subsets of that, one of which could be warm. This is the same exact argument here. So, all right. So this guy wrote, you cannot be neither a theist or an atheist. I said, want to bet? $100 cash? I'll have that bet. I'll do anybody out there, $100, no problem. He says, I say, I will put up $100 that you're wrong. We'll have experts evaluate are claims of my channel. I said make it for 1,000. You're like, your choice. I'll go to $1,000. Easy. Because I'm that confident, because I know logically, I know the logic. You can be neither a theist nor an atheist, logically. Because even if you start changing your definitions, you're just doing a local change. You're just basically making a semantic argument. But categorically, if you start using set theory, if you start using actual logic, then no, you cannot make this argument that you must be either a theist or an atheist. You can make the argument you must be a theist or not theist. Sure, you can derive that from first principles. There are some issues with that when it comes to what's called theological incognitivism, but that's so technical that I'm not going to get into it. But to a theological incognitivist, they would probably say they're neither a theist nor a not theist. But again, that's because of their specific position. But logically, they are theist or not theist. That is because of the law of non-contradiction, the law of excluded middle. These are just fundamental things of classical logic, and what's called the principle of bivalence, that every proposition must be either true or false. True means that God exists. False means that God does not exist, right? If you believe it's true, you're a theist. If you believe it's false, you're an atheist. I don't know how anybody could ever argue otherwise with that. That is so simple that I really, every time I talk to an atheist who disagrees with that, I'm like, how do you disagree with that? I still can't wrap my head around how they disagree with that. Here's the proposition. God exists. It is either true or it's false, right? True or false. True or false. There's no other option because of the classical logic rules of logic, the canonical laws. And so if it's true, God exists, and you believe it, you're a theist, and you got it right. If God does not exist, and you believe that God does not exist, you're an atheist, and you got it right. Where's the problem? Now, if you want to say that atheism is merely a lack of belief that God exists, the theist can do the exact same thing, which Dr. Pai acknowledges in his review, that it would be special pleading not to allow them to do that. The theist can say, well, let's change the proposition. Hang on one sec. The theist could say the proposition is God does not exist. The atheist will say, well, I believe that, or I don't believe that. If they believe it, they're an atheist, right? They believe there's no God. If they don't believe it, does that mean they're by necessity a theist? No, clearly not. So that just kind of shows that, yeah, theists and atheists are not a logical dichotomy. I mean, they are dichotomous in that you must be in one or the, if you cannot be in both. You could be in one and not the other, but you can't be in both, but you can be in neither sets. So yeah, I was standing off for $1,000. My volume's a bit low. I could turn it up a little bit. One sec. Testing. Audio. Is that better? Is that a little louder? Let me know if that's a little louder. If not, I can turn off my compression filter, but I prefer not to do that. How's that, Anisfrida? Is that louder? Because I turned up my gain, so it should still have the same volume, but a little bit higher gain. I'll wait for him to respond. All right. But you guys see this? You guys, understand that you can be neither a theist nor an atheist, because those are, while mutually exclusive sets, they're not jointly exhaustive. All right. He also says again, you cannot be neither a theist or an atheist. Well, you're just wrong. You're just wrong. And the next one. Oh, I don't have to make it up. It's there in black and white on this very page for all to see. I even took screenshots of your profanity. You'd like me to repost them. That was the refutation on my paper when I was talking to this guy. I used bad words. Let me make this very clear to anybody who has not had informal logic, which I did take in college, by the way. Ad hominem fallacy does not mean insult. They're not the same thing. If I say you're stupid, that's not an ad hominem fallacy. One could argue it's an ad hominem attack, maybe if they want to, colloquially. Yeah, I mean, I can see that. But it's not an ad hominem fallacy, and therefore, when you're talking about logic, to say ad hom, you shouldn't use that term, because you're talking about fallacious reasoning at that point. A fallacious argument would be, you're wrong because you're stupid. That's an ad hom fallacy. But if I say you're wrong and I give you all the reasons why you're wrong logically, and then I say you're stupid, that's just invective. That's just an insult. That's not an Mohammedan fallacy. So when people are talking about logic and they use the term abham, they're not using it correctly. So when if I say something profanity wise, that's not an argument. If you say I'm wrong because I used a bad word, that is an ad hom attack. By definition, that is an ad hom attack. Because you're saying that I'm wrong about something about me. If I say John Foley is wrong because he kicks puppies, not that John Foley would kick puppies, he likes puppies. But if I said that, that would be an ad hominem fallacy. I'm making an argument that he's wrong because something about him. But if I say, hey, John Foley, has a crappy accent, that's just, it's just being mean, but it's not an ad hom. Michael Sherlock again. He says, I am an agnostic, points down, which means I'm not psychologically committed to the idea that a God exists, points down, which means I don't believe in a God, points down, which means I'm really an atheist. This is what's called a bad argument. Clearly, this is a bad argument. Like I said, he likes to troll. Michael, once again, because you don't seem to understand this and you'll never watch this or whatever, just because you lack a belief in God does not by necessity mean you're an atheist. Nowhere is that the case. No argument has ever been made in any paper I've ever read that demonstrates that logically. None. Why? Because it is wrong. You cannot logically argue by necessity, and I'm talking about global necessity, that if you lack a belief in God, you're by necessity an atheist. You can make up your own semantic nonsense and say by local necessity, but that's not an argument. I can say, well, you're either an atheist or a dog. You're not a dog, therefore you're an atheist. That's true by local necessity, by what's called a disjunctive syllogism. But that clearly is not ontologically the case because there's many other options. But if I'm only giving you a disjunction of two disjuncts, which is not a false dichotomy, I can just make it into an or statement. You're either an atheist or a dog. That's logically a disjunction. And I could say, well, you're not a dog, you're an atheist. That's valid. That's logically valid. It's not sound clearly because you're not a dog, or you're not an atheist because you're not a dog. It's just not the propositions are first one isn't true, right? Because it's not true. You could be an atheist. You could be neither an atheist nor a dog. So the first proposition of the disjunct is just not true. So it's not sound, but it is logically valid. But by local necessity, the conclusion would follow if it was sound. But that's not what I mean by necessity. What I mean by necessity is globally that you must be either an atheist or a dog. We know that's not true. So by necessity, if you're an agnostic, it just means you don't believe, but it doesn't mean you're an atheist, right? An atheist doesn't believe, but that doesn't make him agnostic. An agnostic holds both on the proposition and on the negation that they don't believe. Both of them. So yeah, he's just wrong on there. Go figure. This person wrote, well, I suspected this, and on my second reading of your OP, it was confirmed. Ooh, confirmed. Hey, Anasfreda, how's my volume still? Is it better? Because if not, I can turn off my compressor and then manually do it. I like the compressor because it makes it all even. It's just, like I said, my gain's a little bit higher. He says, you're a presuppositionalist hiding it very well in your post, but you still let the cat out of the bag. Presuppositionalism, when divine revelation from the Bible is the only basis for rational thought. Yeah, I'm a presuppositionalist, clearly. I don't believe in God, but I'm a presuppositionalist apologist. This is called fractally wrong. This is not even wrong. This is so wrong to be not even wrong. But this is the kind of refutations I get from my paper. Oh, I read your OP. You must be a presuppositionalist. Can somebody explain how I'm a presuppositionalist when I don't believe in God? Because I'm confused on that. This is, again, a very brilliant refutation of my paper on atheism. Dale says, Atheist Republic? That is equally as goofy as saying atheist religion. You, sir, have lost it. I'm like, not sure what that means. This guy, Dale, didn't seem to understand there was an actual group, or there is an actual group, called Atheist Republic. They're a real organization. They are a crappy organization. They don't deal with atheism. Their whole shtick is just making fun of theists, which is fine if you want parody, if you want, to mock people, whatever. But Atheist Republic has nothing to do with atheism. Literally nothing to do with atheism. All they do is just post memes and say silly things like, you believe in a sky daddy. That's not an argument. So he didn't understand that Atheist Republic was an actual organization. Again, these are the brilliant refutations I get on Facebook. He says, a republic is a form of government. No kidding. Wow, you're smart. There is no atheist government. I respond, JFC, you can figure out what that means. This is why I think New Atheist TM are legit inept. Atheist Republic is an atheist organization. Their name is on the meme. atheistrepublic.com. Holy shit. Yeah. The meme at the very bottom has Atheist Republic on it. I mean, where do you go with this? Where do you, when we talk about atheist Facebook, atheists on Facebook or Facebook atheists, this is the kind of dumb shits we mean. This is what we see. When we have people telling me I'm a presuppositionist. When we have people telling me to prove my God exists that I don't believe in. When we have people that don't even understand what the group Atheist Republic is and think that we're talking about a form of government. These are dumb atheists. This person says, this channel fell off. Big back Kyle Curtis. This was on the NonSequitur Show. I only recluded this because I thought my retort was pretty witty. I said, we don't allow domestic abusers that beat up on gay men on this channel. There you go. This person says, who judged those debates? You? Because I said, hey, I've won a numerous amount of debates. And he said, who judged them? Well, as I noted on one of my debates from Wayne Fillmore, he had written an article to BioLogos where he changed his position. He left young Earth creationism. He accepted macroevolution existed. He accepted the age of the Earth was billions of years old. I don't think anybody has to judge that as a debate. If you debate somebody on macroevolution and they're a young Earth creationist and they leave young Earth creationism a month later and they accept macroevolution and they say, you convinced me, nobody has to judge that. That's a win. I don't know how much bigger win you can get than that. This guy writes, it's amazing how you claim you're not Christian, because I'm not Christian. To be Christian, you have to accept certain tenets of Christianity, such as Jesus rose from the dead, which I don't believe. Jesus was God or son of God, which I don't believe. Do I believe Jesus existed? Yes. I'm not a mythicist. I'm a historicist. I think there is a historicity when it comes to Jesus, that there was some core figure, but he was just a man. And then he says, then defend the New Testament on everyone's post, just like Steve McRae does. Oh, I'm sorry. You know what? Yeah, this was directed to somebody else. But then he adds on here, then defend the New Testament on everyone else's post, just like Steve McRae does. Can anybody tell me why I've ever defended the New Testament? I'm a little confused on that, because I've never done that. So this person was just stupid. This person wrote, Steve has been playing what is called the long con. Steve started a debate channel on YouTube. Invite the most credentialed science communicators on it to debate the likes of Ken Hovind and George Lujack, which should happen. That is true. Then, when his followers' defenses are down, boom! Have you heard the good news? This is my favorite. This is brilliant. I actually like this one. This one's really good because it's true. That's true. That's my. I am playing the long con game. So I have the NonSequitur Show channel, which again will be streaming on 7 o'clock with Dr. Pi. I invite all these scientifically literate PhDs on, all these experts on, and we talk about, all these great subjects like, astrophysics and biology. But then eventually I'm going to be like, hey, by the way, have you guys heard the good news? Yeah, I'm playing the long game. So this wasn't a dumb comment. This one's actually brilliant. I thought it was funny. This was good. This one from Twitter. This guy blocked me immediately after this particular tweet. And I'm like, I don't even remember who you are, dude, but whatever. He says, I don't know if you remember me. I vaguely. I did kind of after the fact, but not when he wrote this. But I know you from my old account, and everything about you scares the fuck out of me. I think the way you think is detrimental to society. And I concluded a long time ago there is nothing I can do to help you. I give up. Wow. The way I think is detrimental to society. I'm a centrist. I really have no radical views that I can think of. I'm a moderate. I don't know why that's scary to society. But I thought that was a pretty heavy comment, you know? And then this one says, what makes your argument a valid argument concerning God? Now, this was directed to somebody else, not to me, but I decided to weigh in on it and said, well, logical structure, right? Well, this was an OP post. That's right. It was just an OP post. And for any argument to be valid, it's logical structure. So I wrote him, what makes your argument a valid argument concerning God? It'd just be logical structure. That's the answer. And he says, so your premise is, and I'm like, doesn't matter. Logical structure is always what determines validity of an argument. Logic 101. He wasn't seeming to understand that. So, how do you know you're not being trolled by these comments? Oh, a lot of them are trolls, but again, a lot of them are just stupid. No, I can guarantee you that a lot of these comments, I mean, I get these types of comments frequently. They really do believe that what they're writing. They don't understand the logic or the philosophy behind anything that we discuss. This person writes, because the proof of God is subjective and personal, you seem to be unaware of the Christian history or theology, and your X equals X is nonsense. Your X equals X nonsense is meaningless. Let's think about this. I'm like, X equals X is meaningless. I must quote you on this. Yeah, it's meaningless. Go ahead and quote me. Thank you. Here I am. I'm quoting you, Bob Purick. You believe that X equals X is meaningless and nonsense. No, it has meaning. It has understanding. Anybody who knows basic math or logic would understand X equals X as the law of identity. It's more formally as all of X equals X, but yeah, same thing. But it's not meaningless. It is not nonsense. I can make sense out of this. Somebody says, hey, Steve, do you know what X equals X means? Yeah, this means something equals itself. X equals itself. So it has meanings. So when I see an atheist say something as stupid as this, yeah, I'm gonna quote you on it. This guy goes on to say, haven't read it. My argument is actually, this guy didn't read my argument at the time. He says, haven't read it. If you're going to critique my argument and you haven't read it, there's a problem. My argument is actual. You don't get to recognize how yours, you just don't recognize how yours fails. William Lane Craig presents all kinds of logical arguments. Yeah, they're usually all valid. I think they're all valid. I don't think William Lane Craig has presented an invalid argument. He did present an argument with Dr. Malpass that I had a question dealing with what's called future tense conditions versus a simple tense. But that was dealing with infinities, and it was very complicated. But I just don't think that he was understanding what Dr. Malpass was saying. But he says, it doesn't mean they are reality, and neither is yours. They are symbols with no recognition of reality. Don't care, stated in plain language in relationship to reality. Well, he didn't read my paper. And my paper is valid, and it's actually sound as well. You don't get to tell me how to dictate my argument. I explain my argument in very simple language in many places. I am going to write something in my blog with a more informal dictation of my argument. But this isn't a refutation. This doesn't show anybody how my argument is invalid or it's unsound. Okay, so this one is going to take a little bit longer. I think this is near the end of this, so I saved this for the last. If you guys can read this, let me know. If not, I can zoom in. Here, I can zoom in. So this guy's name's Andrew Parker. I did tell him I'm going to be doing this, so he can look at it later. So this was a brilliant refutation that he had. I'm going to go through, I think, 3 screen caps of his brilliant refutation. Then I got to get going because I got to get ready for the NonSequitur Show. But he says, I explained to him, okay, so the first part, given phi and psi are in subalternation, and you don't have to worry about the logic, but basically this is Dr. Demi's schema, logical schema for the square of opposition. He is, in his refutation, you don't understand any what that means. It's okay, it doesn't matter. But his refutation is, you can ignore all that. I expect Steve just adds things like that to sound super smart. No, I added it because I wanted to make sure that in my paper, I was describing an L1 system, a logically complete system for a symbiotic square of opposition based upon Dr. Demi's system. That's all. I included that. This wasn't in my paper, by the way, but I included it in a short version of my blog to show where I got the relationships between the contraries, the subcontraries, the subalternations, and the contradictories of the square of opposition or the symbiotic square of opposition. That's why I included it, because it's Dr. Demi's logical notation. That's all. I didn't need it to sound smart. Either it's right or it's wrong. Either it's valid or it's invalid. I included it because it's valid. You know, I wanted to make sure that if S entails that there's a material condition that the converse doesn't hold. Like I'm talking about subalternation here. For subalternation, if P implies Q, it doesn't mean that Q implies P. The converse doesn't necessarily hold. If it did, it's called a biconditional. But I'm literally giving Dr. Demi's definition of a subalternation, if and only if S, which is subject, or in this case, he's using it as subalternation, I think. No, I think he's using it as the subject. Yeah, I'm sorry. Entails phi implies psi, and it does not entail that psi implies phi, which is basically saying P implies Q, but Q doesn't imply P, which anybody who knows logic knows that's true. The converse doesn't necessarily hold. So I don't have to sound super smart to put that in there. I know what it means, and I put it in there to show the logic, because people always say, hey, Steve, prove your arguments. Hey, Steve, can you prove that? Yeah, I proved it in my blog. I literally proved this argument in my blog. So you can't win with some people. Some people say, hey, prove your argument. When you do, they're like, oh, you're just sounding smart. Well, no, I did exactly what you asked me to do. He goes on to say, I say, let phi be B subject does not believe G, and psi B not believes G. Basically, I'm just saying, look, this metalogical symbol, which is the psi and the phi, or the phi and the psi here, basically, one is just saying one believes there's God, doesn't exist, and one does not believe God exists, right? And so it's the difference where the scope is for the negator. And he says, no point. He could just use words for those secondary symbols. Well, yeah, I could, but I'm proving an argument using logic. People have asked me to prove my arguments, so I did on my blog. That's not a refutation. And I do explain it at the bottom. I literally explain this in my blog. He says, to explain them, which he did not bother to do here at all. No, I didn't do it on Facebook, but I did it in my blog, if you ever read my stuff. BS not G means the subject believes that there are no gods, not being no or not, and G meaning gods. Actually, G means the proposition that God exists is what it means. So not quite correct. Although Stephen invariably uses the singular name God instead. And if you look on my blog, I actually say I use gods or God to include gods, or God, capital G. I don't do it in the classical theist schema. So I include that in my blog. Because again, this came from my blog originally. And I just happened to put it on my Facebook. But it originally comes from my blog, which I explain all this stuff in my blog. So it's not a refutation. BG here means here's not believe in gods. Yeah, G is actually the proposition God exists, but we'll give it to him. I know that he means that by these symbols because I've seen and argued this study with him over and over, and he still gets kind of wrong. He also seems to expect people to be familiar with his previous writings. Yeah, because I've been doing this for 10 years, and I've included my blog and my videos numerous times. So yeah, I do have an expectation if they're going to come after me for what I write. There's a history there. You know, I don't have to keep reinventing the wheel and explain to people step one when they're trying to tell me I'm wrong. Like he's that special thing. No, but again, if somebody's going to say I'm wrong, I'm not going to start from step one. It's just a waste of my time. And so I basically say here that if you believe there's no God, that implies you don't believe there's a God. That's all I'm saying. That phi implies psi. Simple as that. He says, ignore the first. It says the same thing with an unnecessary level of abstraction. Well, it's metalogic, first of all, and why would you ignore the first when I'm making a logical argument? This is not a refutation. Whether you understand it or not, it's irrelevant. I'm on my blog making the argument, and I do explain all these symbols and in great detail on my blog in the argument. So why would you say ignore it? That's not an argument. The second simply uses the arrow symbol, which means implies. Okay. So believing God don't exist implies that one also does not believe in gods. Correct. In other words, all you're saying that if you believe gods do not exist, then you also lack a belief in gods. Very good. Yes, that is correct. And then he says, does not believe that God does not exist, right? Because not phi here is does not believe that God does not exist. He says, this is really weird here. Why? He says, he adds another abstraction by simply adding the not symbol to the B, not G. Well, B sub S, not G, but whatever. And the single symbol he made up for that. I didn't make up that symbol. That symbol, phi, comes from Dr. Demi's logical notation in metalogic. And that comes from other logical textbooks. Typically speaking, if you're using metalogic, which it encapsulates like a whole schema of things, right? If you use P and Q, you're talking about atomic propositions. But if I want to use a collection of propositions, then I'll use more metalogic, right? Because it could be for any P, right? For any proposition, not just a P that's specific. I wanted to use a metalogical form that says for anything. And so I didn't make up that. That's not something I made up. This is weird because he doesn't even use the term not phi afterwards anyways. Yes, I do. So what's the point? Unless it's to add more symbols in order to more cleverer. No, it's a logical argument. He is merely intriguing the concept of not having a belief in the non-existence of gods, not believing that there are no gods. Yeah, so what? Again, I'm not understanding his refutation here. All right. He goes on to say, then if not BSG and not G, then not BSG and not BSG. Conjunction and introduction. And all I'm saying right there, by the way, is if you don't believe there's a God and you have no positive epistemic status that there is no God, you're agnostic. That's all I'm saying. If not, I'm literally saying if you're a non-theist and you're not believing there isn't a God, then you must be agnostic. There's only three real epistemic spaces there. There's believes, disbelieves, and suspends judgment. And so I'm basically saying if you don't believe and you don't disbelieve, the only option left is suspend judgment, which is agnostic. That's kind of what I'm arguing there. That's, in fact, that's exactly what I'm arguing there. And he says, this is really pointless. Well, I agree. Your refutation is crap. And again, I expect that it is all for the sake of making home sound super duper clever by adding another symbol, which is the caret symbol, which means conjunction, and letting you know what he knows the terms. Yeah, so a lot of people do. This is basic stuff. And their meaning like conjunction, introduction. Yeah, again, basic logic. And again, on my blog, I was proving this. Are we impressed yet? I don't care if you're impressed. I care if my logic is wrong. Again, I'm not a logician. I do basic stuff. I don't ever claim to be a logician. I don't know logic very well. I know basic logic, very basic logic. But if you're going to refute what I say, at least refute what my argument is, which he hasn't done yet. His entire refutation so far is, oh, Steve is trying to sound smart. That's not a refutation. Either it's correct or it's not. If it's not correct, why? He says, if not BSG, then not whatever. He says, if you understand the terminology, you'll see immediately how pointless that is. Why is that pointless? It's literally saying if not believing in God and you don't believe there isn't a God, then you must be agnostic. Basically, I'm saying if not atheist and not theist, therefore agnostic. Is what I'm basically saying if you're not a theist and you're not an atheist, well, I should say if you're not believing there's a God and you're not believing that there isn't a God, so you're basically not an atheist and not a theist. You are agnostic. There you go. He says, if you understand the terminology, you immediately see point. Hang on. Oh, yeah, here we go. And then he said, all that says is, if one doesn't believe in gods and doesn't believe there are no gods, then one doesn't believe in gods and doesn't believe there are no gods. That is correct. Yes, that is correct. Yay! That is very correct. Meaning you're agnostic. That's as clever as saying, if the cheeseburger, then I has cheeseburger. Well, no. It's saying, if you would understand the argument, is that there's three epistemic statuses that you can have that are rational: believe, disbelieve, and suspend judgment. And if you don't believe and you don't disbelieve, you must suspend judgment. So I'm trying to explain that the agnostic position is neither theist nor atheist, is what I'm trying to explain to him using Dr. Dami's notation, because he has non-agnostic as either theist or atheist, non-theist as either theist or non-theist is either atheist or agnostic, and atheist is either non-agnostic, or excuse me, non-atheist is either agnostic or theist. Three mutually exclusive, and in this case jointly exhaustive sets. That's what I'm trying to explain. Semantic instantiation. Yeah, that just means that you put some words in there. Oh, look how big brain he is. Those look really fancy, super smart words. I'm glad you like them. If I didn't say this, he would no doubt talk down to me, because you're an idiot, but whatever, my not understanding of them. No, I don't care if you understand the words or not. I think you're an idiot because you're trying to refute my argument, which is a logical argument, by saying I use big words. That's not an argument. Because my brain must not be as great as his. Again, you're an idiot for not refuting the argument. If you don't understand the argument, that doesn't make you stupid or anything like that. Nothing like that. I never say anything like that. A lot of people aren't going to understand the argument. I get that. But if you're going to say my argument's wrong and you don't understand it and you can't show that it's wrong, then I think you're an idiot. Weak atheism, weak theism, then Gnosticism. Yeah. That's what I wrote. He says, look at all that. Not one of those terms would introduce at all now. Not a one. I just have to guess what they're referring to as mine, because I have them on my blog. What I wrote on the Facebook came from my blog. And I've put it out in the Facebook groups numerous times. Fortunately, I'm familiar with them. Yeah, same with everybody else who's read my blog. That's why I don't have to put all the information out every single time. You're familiar with me. So is other people that have seen these arguments. He is calling for weak atheism. I have never seen anyone but Steve define it that way. Really? Everybody I know philosophy defines it that way. That's literally what weak atheism is defined logically as. Burgess Jackson defines it that way. Demi defines it that way. Draper defines it that way. Show me somebody who doesn't. The term weak atheism came from the perspective of atheism being does not believe, or not believing, lack of belief in gods. And further distinguishing into weak atheism, simple lack of belief without the belief or conviction that there necessarily are one, and strong atheism, the positive belief there are no gods. Steve has taken the term weak atheism from that perspective and set of... Hang on. I think I got another screenshot here. Do I? Or was that the last one? No, I guess that's the last one. Shoot. All right. He says, Steve has taken the term weak atheism from that perspective in the set of definitions, the only perspective that it uses this term, but applying, and I guess I didn't get the finish of that. I'm sorry. But anyways, that's what weak atheism is. It is, I do not believe in God, or I lack a belief in God. And it's also logically the same as weak theism and agnosticism if you have no positive epistemic status, which I've argued numerous times before. So anyways, this dude right here thinks he somehow refuted my argument by saying I use big words, and that my logic is logical. I don't know. I don't understand how he thinks this is a refutation, how this makes him look good. Steve just wants to look smart. I don't care about that. I couldn't give a damn. I want somebody to say, oh, crap, Steve's logic is right or wrong. And by the way, people have found errors in my logic before. More than one occasion. I had uploaded an old version of my paper accidentally a while back. I don't know how I did it, but I did. And it was before I made some edits because I had my paper in LaTeX in different directories. And so the one I wanted to upload was in a different directory, and I uploaded an older version. And because you can re-upload your paper, And in that original paper, or one of the older ones, it had a logical error in it. It did have a logical error. Somebody pointed it out to me. And you know what I said? I said, God damn, you're right. It's like, yeah, you're right. I don't know what happened here. And I fixed it, immediately fixed it. And then I think it was actually Dr. Pi originally, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it was Dr. Pi. But somebody else noticed something before him. I don't know who it was, and I apologize. But somebody had actually noticed before even Dr. Pi noticed that I made a logical mistake in something. But instead of arguing with them, I fixed it. Why? Because it's logic. And I'm like, damn, they're right. They got me dead to rights. I made a boo-boo. But I already fixed it later on, but I uploaded an older paper, so I knew that they were right. And anybody who looks at the paper, could see, yeah, it's an error here. But Dr. Pi had noticed in one of my definitions that I made a little goof on the meta logic symbols, transposed or something. Minor mistake. But again, it was an older version, and I still don't know how I did it. But anyways, I have a corrected version. The paper's been up for a while now, that with the latest version. And so the version that Dr. Pi had done his review on, it should all be correct. That's the correct version. Speaking of which, though, we're going to be heading over to the Non-Sequitur Show here soon. 4 o'clock Pacific, 7 o'clock Eastern. Link in the video description. Come watch us review Dr. Pi's review of my argument, and show how an actual person who knows the topic with a degree in mathematics reviews an actual argument, rather than this idiot here who doesn't know his ass from a hole in the ground. This is not a refutation, Andrew. I'm sorry, but everything in here is just complete, stupid. Andrew Parker. And by the way, I did tell him I'm going to be doing this, and he said, yeah, by all means. I'm like, okay. So Andrew Parker, now everybody knows that you are completely inept at doing a proper refutation of an argument. Saying somebody just wants to sound smart is not a refutation. Not showing the logic is wrong is not a refutation. I'm not impressed. Yeah, you actually understood the argument to some degree. I don't think you fully understood the conclusion per se, but you understood the logical notation, which is, you're halfway there, which is more than some. But you didn't understand the conclusion, and you certainly didn't refute the argument. So let's go to the Non-Sequitur Show channel in about 90 minutes and see how an actual educated person attempts to evaluate my paper. And with that, guys, I'm going to call this particular stream to a close. I'm going to probably stream to this channel late at night, just because, again, I don't want to lose monetization if possible. But if I do, it's okay too. But please share this video to get some views on it. I don't know how many views I need to maintain. I really have no idea. In 30 days, either it's going to be still monetized or it won't be, and I'm not going to reapply because, again, I don't make anything off this channel. It's just nice to have a backup channel, that's all. But with that, guys, I'd like to thank you guys for watching. I don't really have time to do a live in-panel, but I tell you what, Blansky Style Live, if you want to go to the Non-Sequitur Show in 90 minutes, I'm sure Dr. Pi and I will open it up for panel, and you can ask your questions there. How does that sound? Okay. And it's Frida. Thanks for joining. John, Chemo, everybody else. Thanks for joining, and we'll see you on the Non-Sequitur Show. Link in the video description. Please like and subscribe this channel and that channel, and please comment what you think, and let me know if anybody here even bothered to actually do a proper refutation on the screenshots that I showed. Good night.